there are new dimensions to the conflict that affect Gaza in ways that, for example, don't exist or don't affect the West Bank in the same way. But so, that is essentially what makes this a political problem. You have an Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and you cannot simply impose a military solution on it, and that is why presumably there is something, not now, but in theory, there ought to be something called a peace process to bring conflicting parties to a state of where they're not in conflict. That's the purpose of the peace process. But thus far, American policy and Israeli policy have dealt with the peace process separately from the Gaza situation, and that's simply, it's not logical and it's not tenable. Egypt is, other than the belligerent parties on the ground, is the actor with the single greatest stake in the outcome and in relation to Gaza. So it has a border with Gaza. It is sometimes a porous border between its Sinai Peninsula on the Egyptian side and the Gaza Strip on the Palestinian side, as well as a very long border with Israel. And so it has a national security interest that there not be flare-ups on its borders, especially when it affects the national security situation inside Egypt. And we've seen how, for example, weapons headed to Gaza make their way into the Sinai and stay there. And you have a very uncertain, fluid, some might say lawless situation in the Sinai Peninsula. So Egypt has a direct stake in Gaza's stability. And it's also been a key player on the Arab scene, on the Palestinian issue. It is the key mediator in intra-factional disputes between the various Palestinian groups. So it is the most involved and has the most interests in this issue. And so it is not necessarily a party in terms of the conflict on the ground, but it certainly will directly affect Egypt's interests. It's a tragic situation. There is loss of life and tremendous tragedy on both sides. There will be those who argue the suffering of one more than the other, but at the end of the day, what conflicts, what diplomacy is about is to end conflicts, and what a peace process is about is to try and end conflicts. And I think the United States currently is not really playing that role at all. It's kind of abdicated to realities on the ground, and it's seems to content to let things play out as they will. There is no sense of urgency about resolving this conflict. Rather, there's a kind of detachment from the issue and from the region in general, and kind of a laissez-faire attitude.